Thanks, Goose. Final Fantasy is as popular as it is weird, and heck, I've never managed to reach that rabid stage of fandom with this series that I see true fans have. But there's no question that it's a pillar of the JRPG genre.
Oh, it definitely is. But when Final Fantasy XIV Online came out in 2010, it was a surprising disappointment. In fact, it was a bit of a mess. And in a very unusual move, Square Enix took the criticism to heart, reshuffled their development team, and have massively overhauled the game to now bring us Final Fantasy XIV Online, A Realm Reborn. After a rough launch, it's now available on PC and PS3. And the platforms cross over, which is so rare for an MMO and kind of incredible.
Like most Final Fantasy storylines, it doesn't link itself to any specific game that's come before. It's also quite strange, full of humorous characters and weird crystals. However, the world itself will still feel familiar with its enemies, music, spells, and combat. And of course, chocobos.
The first thing you notice is how creepy the cutscenes are.
Yeah, without much voice acting, it's pretty creepy. We found it was much less awkward if you just do the voices yourself.
I mean, they're not all silent, but it is a bit bizarre to see their mouths just gaping like that.
Yeah, in fact, I think the best way to describe this game in general is inconsistent. Some areas in the world feel a bit old and are full of little invisible walls and ledges, and I still remember some of those from my short time with the first iteration back in 2010. The map interface is still pretty horrid. And I felt like a lot of the enemies didn't really belong in the locations they were in.
Yeah, I mean, we're so used to fantasy and sci-fi taking such a measured and consistent approach to the design of their worlds, but Final Fantasy really seems to revel in that absurdity, doesn't it? I mean, it's just mayhem. It's like the lead designer is too afraid to say no to their team, so they just throw everything into a blender, give it a quick blast, and then voila.
But then on the flip side, some of the locations are absolutely stunning. And the character models are incredible, so beautiful.
Unicorn.
Yeah, the way they move and animate is just so fluid. Plus, with all that history of Final Fantasy behind the creature creations, they're the perfect mix of cute, funny, and terrifying.
Yes, thanks Square Enix, I don't need to sleep anymore. It's fine. I wasn't too impressed with the starting races. I thought they were a bit samey, and naturally I went for the most hilarious option I could, but no matter how hard I tried, Hicks, I could not make my little guy look ugly. I think he's adorable. In fact, he's fabulous.
Yes, I went typical elf archer chick. I was gonna go that cat race, but I couldn't quite deal with the idea of having a tail. I also really like the Arcanist and how they command spells with their book, and with such style. Once again, fabulous.
And the clothes, Hex! I've never cared so much about fashion in a game before. When I think back to Warcraft, you know, there may be 2 or 3 bits of gear that I actually remember, but I remember everything here from my first 10 levels. It's just in such high detail and so beautiful. Including my very slick level 10 paddle sword. Level 10, you better believe that's a paddling.
There's also a multi-class system. You gain the ability to unlock new classes or jobs. You can pick and choose as you like. There's no limit to the amount of roles you can have. You can just rock up at that guild and sign the dotted line.
Interestingly, your level is attached to each job. This means that if you're, say, a level 30 Arcanist and you want to become a Marauder, you drop back down to level 1, stats and all. You then start completing lower level guild quests to level up that job, and the deeper you get into this game, the more flexible your class gets.
Yeah, and your class actually changes based on your main hand weapon. As an example, if you swap in a hammer, then you'll switch to your blacksmithing class. You then have to equip appropriate gear for that class. Once you've adopted a few roles, the armor inventory can become a bit overwhelming as you juggle hats and shoes and pants for each of the classes you're pursuing.
You can create clothing sets to alleviate some of the clutter, but yeah, it's still pretty messy. I like that there are so many options for the way you want to play your character, but I still think other MMOs such as Rift did that whole multi-class thing a bit better and much clearer.
Well, let's talk about the combat. For me, it feels quite similar to Final Fantasy XII's battle system, which was about selecting your enemies in an open world and attacking them. The fights themselves in 12 felt like an MMO of sorts anyway. Most of your fights will be slow-paced, one-on-one. That's until you reach the instance dungeons. And this is where the combat really shines, and in true MMO style where the classes become really important.
It might just be personal taste, but I really didn't enjoy the combat. It's just so slow-paced and measured, and I like it to be a bit more frantic.
Yeah, I think you do warm to it, but it certainly won't be for everyone. If you're not a fan of Final Fantasy combat though, this might actually be accessible enough to lure you in.
I liked how you can go into first person, and also how far you can zoom out, especially if you're a short little guy like me playing in high resolution. And I have to admit, riding a chocobo is really fun. Even though I couldn't afford to buy one, I just had to rent it.
At first I found it a bit strange that so many quests required you to use emotes. It's a nice touch and different to your usual hand-in quests. Quests in general are a bit weird, but in a good way. The design is mostly solid and you'll rarely get stuck waiting for objectives to spawn. I found that for the most part, they were pretty good at trailing you along to the next area compatible with your level too.
Yeah, I still got lost once or twice though and ended up having to backtrack, especially when there was a quest related to in the city. That city is a nightmare to navigate. It's all just so samey. Oh, that map is so horrid. But it's out in the open world where this game really shines. And one thing I like most about this game, besides how fabulous I look, is just how big this open world feels. Once again, it's helped because my guy is so tiny, but I felt like this was a nice big open world with lots of adventure ahead of me, and that's not an easy thing to achieve.
Yeah, after that boxy feel of Neverwinter, it's nice to have something off in the distance to really strive for.
Another thing they've nailed is the controller support. Menus are fast, responsive, and easy to set up. It's near perfect, and I think that's a first for an MMO. You can play this game entirely with a controller on PC. And I prefer to play it that way.
This is of course due to the game being on PS3 as well, and I'll start by saying that it's fantastic that console players have a really fleshed out MMO to jump into, and I'll finish by saying that on console it's not the prettiest looking game out there. The textures are low res, the draw distance is short, the lighting is flat, and even after all that it's super framey. I mean, it's not unplayable, but it's not pleasant either.
Is it backwards day hex? Because normally I'm the one complaining about frame rates and textures and draw distance.
I think we spend too much time together. But yeah, we're just so spoilt with, how beautiful these games look on PC.
Yeah, visually it's about what I expected it to be, and I think that's just to cater for all the extra models that may need to render when there's a lot of online people in one section. One thing that did frustrate me was the lag. You don't really notice it in general combat, but whenever there's an AoE thing to dodge, you have to move so far out of the way of that AoE or it hits you, and it just felt unfair. So it's either lag or bad design.
Oh, I was ages away from that.
All in all, I have a lot of respect for this MMO though. There are some unique aspects to it. The cross-platform play, the controller support, the character models, that and the fact that so much attention to detail has been paid to the story. For me, I think the biggest downside is the fact that it uses a subscription model. I'd play this for about a month or so, but having to pay a subscription, that'd be about it.
Yeah, I've had enough time subscribing to an MMO that I love, let alone one that I just like quite a lot. I also thought it didn't really encourage you to play with friends, not in the way that Neverwinter or Guild Wars 2 did, even with those Fate events. All in all though, from where this game was to where it is now, I think they've actually done a pretty incredible job rebuilding it, so I think it's worth 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
I'm giving it 7 out of 10.